Hey, everybody. Great chat today around, guess what? 6G. Yes, you heard me right. 6G, super exciting topic over the next years and decade. Today, I have Alex Lawrence, managing editor of 6G World. Alex, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate the chance to be on here and talking about 6G.
And I'm excited to have you here. It's a topic that's of personal and professional interest and to many of my viewers. Before we dive in, maybe introduce yourself, Alex. And what is 6G World? Is it like an amusement park, like Disney World, or is that something else?
Yeah, 6G World is a media outlet. It's a very small one, but we're looking really at what comes after 5G and how do we get there in a way that makes it useful for the general public and doesn't end up destroying either the planet or the sort of companies that are trying to bring it to life. So
Fantastic. Well, let's start with some definitions. How would you define 6G or the technology today, and what's the Oxford English Dictionary definition? Let's say.
6G today, between you and me, is largely hype at the moment.
Oh, the title is beyond the hype, so we have to.
Insofar as there's not been any one specific definition yet. So I mean, what happened was a couple of years back, a variety of different national governments realised that things like 3G and 4G and even 5G were kind of good for the economy, but the benefits weren't evenly spread about. And there are all these kinds of issues around trust and privacy online and so on. And so they set out different priorities and visions for what they wanted the future to be like, and not so much what technology they wanted, but what outcomes they wanted for society. Something that's greener, that can overcome the digital divides that we've got, and all these kinds of things. So the essentially after that, the rest of the sort of research industry and all this kind of things been getting on board with that and trying to clarify what those different visions look like and how we take them and turn those into technology requirements and other pieces. And there's kind of a business layer as well, which I think is still very vague at the moment as to how we actually go about moving from where we are today and make money from any of that. So at the moment, it's all boiling away in this sort of great pool of uncertainty. It's starting to become clearer, but it's just at the right moment for it to be controversial and for us to steer it in one way or another.
Well, I'm glad we're talking now. Sounds like a timely discussion. And is the idea that 6G is more than just another G? It's not 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, but is the vision quite a transformational one, not just higher speeds, for example?
A lot of that depends on who you talk to. There are people who have become very good at a particular kind of technology, for example, and for them, kind of breaking out of that mindset is difficult because we do what we're good at by and large. If you ask me, I think 6G is becoming clearer that it's going to probably be a set of different technologies. So where like 3G and 4G and 5G have been sort of mainly about a new radio technology or this kind of thing, and it's faster cellular. In 6G, we're probably looking more at a whole variety of things in terms of sort of software underlying how connections work, to make a network of networks. So, instead of your phone, let's say, linking just to Vodafone or
Mhm.
AT&T or whoever,
Mhm.
and then roaming from that. If you don't have coverage, it might be going to Wi-Fi, anyone else's cellular, including maybe like a local town or hospitals cellular, could be going to satellite, whatever it is. It's just doing whatever it needs to do to get you that service wherever you happen to be at whatever time. And I mean, that sounds kind of obvious on one level, that
Mm.
stuff should just work. But as somebody living in England, I can't reliably make a phone call if I'm on a train. So just being able to do that would be revolutionary. And we've heard cases of, for example, I think it was in France, where they tried fitting ambulances with 5G so that they could be having like live video consultations with doctors
Mm.
while the ambulance was still traveling. And the problem being that you don't reliably have 5G everywhere. So
Mm.
they pulled that plan back because it was more dangerous than not having the service
Mm.
at all.
Wow.
So
So,
yeah,
so yeah, we've seen a challenging decade-long ramp up to 5G, and we've seen some over commitment there and under delivery. Even right now, we're only getting standalone 5G, which is all the sort of ultimate benefits happening right now, and people are already talking about 5.5G or something 5G advanced. So it's been a
yeah.
long road. So what are some of the challenges now that the industry is facing with the development and implementation of 6G? Like, what are the roadblocks that need to be overcome?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, in many ways, the sort of situation now is one of the biggest challenges because a lot of telcos have put huge amounts of investment into 5G to secure rights to the spectrum and to deploy these networks, while they're still keeping their 4G networks running and all this kind of thing. So and they're not seeing much money coming back in for all this investment, which is a problem for them. So, if you were to speak to them, say 12, 18 months ago about 6G, you'd see the panic in their eyes at the thought that they've got to do this all over again. And I think since then they've actually sort of sent quite a lot of messages to the market going, well, we don't want to be doing this again. So
Mm.
what we're starting to look at actually is a much more sensible approach, I think, which is to take 5G advanced, and in a perfect world for the telcos, 6G would just be like some software upgrades that they can
Mm.
roll out, or a variety of different capabilities that they can plug into the network, see if it takes off, maybe take it back if it doesn't. A bit like Google trying out new upgrades to its services and rolling them out worldwide if it seems successful, and taking them away if it's not. So that would be a completely different business model for what a new kind of network is, but also that would hopefully make it a lot easier for end users as well. I mean, if you didn't have to buy a new phone with a new kind of connection, brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm just happy to have eSIM. So I would, that's been a delight. So give us a state of play on the R&D that's being done globally around 6G. It does seem there's being a lot of work done in labs and telcos and silicon software. What's being done and what countries are really investing heavily in that?
Yeah, you're right in terms of countries investing heavily, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with this idea of tying into what kind of societies and countries governments want to end up with. So, I mean, there are the usual suspects, I suppose. Sort of traditionally in telecoms, Europe's been a contender with the likes of sort of Nokia and Ericsson as big dogs. In the Far East, you've got China. There's never to be ignored. But then the USA and North America more generally sort of saw that in 5G, companies like Huawei were really taking the crown, I guess, and they're being much more assertive in terms of driving towards a 6G that's not only technically sensible, but also ties in with these different values to do with, the right kind of society, the right kind of sustainability, making something that's a lot more energy efficient, those kinds of things. So, those three players you'd kind of expect maybe. But then we're hearing countries like India, they've launched their own Bharat 6G alliance just recently, and they're actually trying to take a much greater role. And I think largely this is because if it's more of a software play, then India's got some huge amounts of expertise in that, and they're sort of their engineers are sort of coming out of the huge number of universities there. So they've got a real opportunity to play a role there. And countries like Singapore or Australia, even Brazil, because we've got things to do with not just the technology as we'd normally expect, but different elements of software and all this kind of thing. It's giving different players a chance to join in new ways. But countries like Japan, they don't talk explicitly about 6G, but beyond 5G, and they're really doing some interesting things, for example, with photonics. So they're sort of looking at if you can create networks that don't actually rely on electrons and electronics at all, but if you can just use light and photons, so that you don't have to for example, send light down a fiber optic cable, then switch that light signal to electricity to go through a server and back to light again, and so on, which uses energy in all those transitions. But just, can we save energy by just sending light all the way through this, which has completely different physics and stuff, but they're doing some mind-boggling things there. Whether that falls into 6G or whether it just falls into, oh wow, who knows yet. But
the next big thing, right? Yeah, I was actually at their research event at NTT recently in San Francisco, where they introduced this photonic network, and it was mind-blowing, literally. And yeah, sustainability is the number one goal. It's not all the other 7 or 8 goals that are key. It's building low energy, lower power consumption, lower cost of materials and recycling. Yeah, it's a pretty novel approach. So given all this activity, is there a risk that there's a fragmentation kind of globally of standards? I mean, you work for GSMA. The beauty was, you had one standard globally and it could be implemented, and you had this one ecosystem. That might not necessarily be the case here, or will it?
That's a really good question. Nobody inside telco wants that to happen. But on the other hand, this is a really confusing and complex time. So, the standards in mobile, for example, are managed by 3GPP and so on. But if we're wanting a network of networks where pretty much your phone or whatever device just goes with what's available and will work, then they've got to start working with the satellite players and the people that sort of manage broadband and Wi-Fi and all this kind of thing. So instead of having one standards body really that can get together and bring all this together, we're going to end up with like this club all trying to work together and make all their technologies as seamless as possible. So it's going to be an incredibly complicated time, I think, just for people to get the right process going on. I mean, honestly, I suspect that what will happen is, I've talked about 6G maybe being a variety of different technologies all kind of working together. And so probably what we'll end up with is maybe this whole smorgasbord of different bits and pieces that adds up to 6G. And different countries will implement different bits, or different operators will sort of pick and choose among those. So you'll get, maybe, let's say in 20 years' time, Japan will be very 6G-ish, whereas Kenya will be a bit 6G. And there'll be stuff that works wherever you are in the world, and some functionality like maybe, I don't know, hologram calling or something that doesn't.
Yeah, great point. I guess the X factor as well is satellite, pun intended. I mean, we didn't have broadband satellite to this scale with Starlink and others when 5G was being defined and developed. What's the role of satellite in 6G? Is that part of the conversation as well?
Yeah, very much so. And there have been some really interesting moves afoot there. I mean, some people, depending on who you talk to, are looking at that as being really revolutionary, and that's especially in places where we don't already have big sort of fiber networks. But we're talking to people who are imagining essentially replacing all of the fiber that you might have to build out just with links to different satellite constellations to be sort of the equivalent of your local cell tower, or the equivalent of the enormous fiber cables that run in between continents, and this kind of thing. And it makes a lot of sense in many ways if it can be made at the right price, essentially, and to carry the right kind of quantities of data. But that's really exciting. If you end up with like terrestrial infrastructure and space infrastructure all working together, then that's going to be huge.
Yeah, brilliant. I know we don't know exactly the use cases that will win with 6G, but we can imagine some really interesting ones. I'm excited about the medical use cases, the Internet of medical things. There's a lot we can't do today with sensors and monitoring of patients that might be suited to 6G. What kind of use cases are you envisioning beyond making calls on trains? But what else are you excited about that could be enabled that couldn't exist otherwise?
Well, I think there's a whole bunch of bits and pieces that have caught my eyes, but I think one of the things that sounds simple, but probably isn't, is the idea that in 2G, it was all about sending voice between different people. In 4G, we got up to video and data. And in 6G, some people are suggesting that this might be where we start being able to send AI algorithms between different places. So, rather than, as people do now for ChatGPT, we type in an instruction on our laptops or our phones, it goes to the cloud and then comes back again. It's like drop that algorithm on your phone, and then nobody can intercept what you're sending back and forth. And you've just got, if you like, your own personal AI on there to do these things for you, which could be a good thing in terms of privacy, security, and all those kinds of good things, which can help build trust in this increasingly complex tech environment. I would love that if that happened, or if I could have like this little AI concierge that basically sort of follows me around all over the place and just manages all of, you know, a whole bunch of my apps and stuff for me.
Fantastic.
In the location where I actually am. That would be brilliant.
Yeah, so many opportunities. So let's shift a little bit to you and the 6G Symposium that's coming this fall. Tell us about that. What's on the agenda there, and what can people expect? How can they get involved as well?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So 6G Symposium is one of two events that we run each year in partnership with various organizations, like in this case, ATIS Next G Alliance, Northeastern University, and Interdigital. Essentially, the idea is to get very smart people from a wide variety of different backgrounds together to try and break out of, if you like, our legacy habits of thought and talk about actually how do we go about making something that isn't just, if you like, technologists getting excited about something and getting carried away with it, but you know, what can we do today to make sure that we end up with the right results, not just in terms of the technology, but in terms of the business models and the use cases that are going to actually make it work. So in other words, how can we make sure that we're not repeating the problems of 5G, basically? And so to that end, we'll be talking about some of the sort of innovations and programs that are going on in North America, who are really sort of striving to take a leading role in this. But we're also trying to bring in some of the other industries that could be usefully engaged there, whether that's automotive or manufacturing. We're talking about the metaverse, and how do we get whatever 6G is to co-evolve with them so that it ends up being useful and that they're ready for it when it appears. And then just dealing with some of the other technology questions, like you know, we know that we need AI to make all of this work, because nobody could manage this on their own. But the details of actually how that happens, and do we need to do anything with that that we don't want to do already in 5G, for example. You know, those kinds of issues, I think, are going to help us define not just, you know, what 6G actually is, but how we get to it in a way that can make sense on a sort of commercial and political level.
Brilliant. Well, it looks like a great event. I look forward to tuning in and following you on Twitter, where we met at 6G World. And yeah, thanks for what you're doing. It's really intriguing. We're all going to be closely following this initiative, and I think supporting it. I mean, it's a really exciting time to be early in this discussion. So thanks so much, Alex. Much appreciated. I'll let you get back to your lovely British summer, hopefully. But
we had that one day this year.
Right, exactly. But thanks so much for spreading the word, sharing your time and insights, and thanks everyone for watching. Feel free to reach out with any questions you might have on social media. Take care.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Evan.